All right, why don't we go ahead and get started? Appreciate everyone taking time to join us today. My name is Joseph Fanup. I am one of the directors of retirement plan consulting here at Sentinel Benefits, and I am joined by my co-host, Jerry Sicalisi. He is our senior vice president of our strategic partner relationships. And again, we appreciate you joining us to talk today about how we can streamline some of your retirement plan administration tasks. But before we get started, I just wanted to let you all know that we are going to be in what we call listen only mode so that everybody has an opportunity to hear the presentation without any distraction. If you have questions as we're moving along, please feel free to enter them into the chat box that's either at the top or the bottom of your Zoom session. And this session will be recorded, and we will be sending out information on where you can access this recording so that you can share it internally with other members of your organization. So thanks again. So we're going to go ahead and get started. Today's agenda, we're going to talk today about what a 316 plan fiduciary is. We're also going to touch on why processes matter. We'll certainly share with you how we're able to help you save time, reduce workloads, and minimize some of your responsibilities, and then go into how you can outsource some of those day-to-day administrative responsibilities, which eventually makes the role easier. And then at the very end, we're going to give you an inside look at a new program that we're going to be rolling out here, so you get the first crack at that. So the objective of today, we want to talk about the tasks that you have as an organization. Jerry and I have been in the business for, well, let's just say a long time. And we've had an opportunity to develop relationships with a lot of the HR professionals and leadership groups. And we hear a lot about the types of tasks that are levied on you as an organization, from, having to address, revenue, cash flow, working through compensation benefits packages, participating in employee interviews and the hiring process, creating trading manuals and things like that. And let's not forget the annual rite of passage of some sort of year-end IRS regulations that changes all of the benefit computations and such. So we understand that there is a lot that's assigned to the benefits, the finance, and the leadership team. And we wanted to talk about some strategies that can help with that. That kind of follows along with what Sentinel's mission is. And that's really just trying to create procedures, processes, functions that make life not only easy for your plan participants, easy for the organization, but easy for you as an HR team. I'll hand it over to Jerry.
Thanks, Joe. And I think a good place to start is just understanding the nature of fiduciaries to retirement plans as mandated by ERISA. Generally speaking, there are two types of fiduciaries. There are investment-related fiduciaries, and then there are administrative-related fiduciaries. Most of us are familiar with the investment type of fiduciary because one of the core ERISA fiduciary duties is tied to what's known as the prudent person rule. And this is where a fiduciary must carry out their duties with the care, skill, prudence, and diligence under the circumstances then prevailing that a prudent expert acting in a like capacity with like aims would act. So what does that basically mean? It basically means if you, the plan sponsor, are not the investment expert, you need to hire one. And for the most part, most plan sponsor of retirement plans have a fiduciary advisor working with them to solve for that component, the oversight of the investments. What most of us don't realize is there is a whole nother side to fiduciaries in retirement plans, and that's this concept of 316. That's the code right out of the regulations. And you as the plan sponsor are responsible for the day-to-day administration. And in the small to mid-sized market, that creates risk. And it creates risk when plan sponsors are not administering the plan in conjunction with how the plan is written. We see this all the time where we have discrepancies, typically around eligibility, compensation. Those are the two that sort of rise to the top. But putting that aside, your service providers, your TPAs, your record keepers, they're working with you to help you fulfill that fiduciary responsibility. But it only has become of recent where there's an opportunity to pass some of those responsibilities onto an expert. Fiduciaries overall, we've made a tremendous amount of progress. If you look back to the 80s and 90s, it was all about plan design, right? Plan sponsors were coming out of defined benefit plans because they were very costly, and they were creating 401k plans, and they needed expertise to help design those plans. And then as we got to what we call Fiduciary 2.0 in the 2000s, it was all about funds and fees. And that really changed the dynamic of an investment fiduciary's role, because it became more of a process-driven engagement. It was more, how do we create a repeatable, prudent process where plan sponsors can sort of help insulate themselves of that liability. And now we're in this new frontier called Fiduciary 3.0. And stewards of plans and advisors alike are really focused today on two things: in education and engagement, and how do we share some of those administrative responsibilities? How do we outsource it? And in today's discussion, certainly there's a fiduciary piece to it. I want to focus more on the opportunity other than the fiduciary role. We are not proposing to step in and serve as a named fiduciary. As you can see, one of the core fiduciary responsibilities under Section 316 is the selection and monitoring of service providers. Some other things like a fidelity bond, enrollment materials. Anytime someone becomes eligible, you as a plan sponsor have a fiduciary duty to make sure that they're given the opportunity to enroll into the plan. Ensuring that when you're segregating contributions, elective deferrals, loan repayments, those need to be separated and deposited into the trust. And the DOL's got some pretty rigid standards around the timeliness of those contributions. The approval of benefit distributions and loans, and signing off on a 5500. Those are all responsibilities, and some 316 fiduciaries will take all of that on, and they'll outsource that completely. And then you have a fiduciary duty to monitor them. Again, our focus today is, how do we make this easy? Yes, there's a fiduciary component. Yes, you get to push off some of that fiduciary duty. It's a shared arrangement. But for us, it really is about the process. What we've found over the years is many of our plan sponsors don't have tight, rigid process around things like offering the plan eligibility. When someone becomes eligible, it's typically just an email that goes out, or maybe oftentimes it's not even an email. It's just a pamphlet that's provided, and there's no documentation and no process behind to make sure that all the necessary fiduciary disclosures were provided, that was documented, so that in the event of an audit 5 years later, where someone's asking for evidence that that's been provided, you can quickly go and pull that material and demonstrate that you as a plan sponsor followed a good faith effort to get that participant everything they needed and adhere to your fiduciary duties. So this is a slide that I talk about often, because most plan sponsors think that because they hire a record keeper and TPA, they're pushing off all that liability. And TPAs in general, third-party administrators, they handle all of the administration to the plan. And yes, they are doing a lot of the heavy lifting, but ultimately it's on you to make sure that it's done, and it's on you to make sure that it's done right. So I'll give you a few examples. I already shared about the eligibility requirement. That's a 316 fiduciary, and the TPA makes that easy for you. They will prepare and oftentimes have the enrollment kit or an enrollment kit video ready and available that you can pull on demand from the plan sponsor website. But you, as the fiduciary, have a fiduciary duty to distribute that and make sure that that's given in a timely manner. Another example is a proven benefit distributions. The timeliness of contributions we've talked about. That is something that a TPA is not going to be directly involved in, but good TPAs will have good process in place to alert plan sponsors if a contribution is deemed untimely, or if there's a pattern that contributions are not coming in accordance with the DOL requirements. Sign in a 5500. Typically, the TPA is preparing a signature-ready Form 5500, and the plan sponsor signs it. Well, what was the process behind before you signed it? And that's often a good question, because most plan sponsors just sign it without really reviewing it and asking good questions. So those are examples of TPAs and their responsibilities and what plan sponsors are required to do. And certainly TPAs make this a lot easier for the fiduciary to act in that capacity. But at the end of the day, they're not the ones that are liable to make sure that this is done right. Next slide. So today we want to present an opportunity where you can continue to retain, or you can share some of these responsibilities. I think Joe hit it on the head early on. We talk with plan sponsors all the time, and we hear it from our advisor partners as well, where they're busy. They're taking on more things, benefit and finance departments, and this is of high importance, but oftentimes it's low in the priorities of the day-to-day tasks that they need to do. So any opportunity to pass that on, they welcome that. And this is really being presented today because we continue to hear, how can you help us outsource some of these responsibilities? Because we just don't simply have the time to do these. The second thing is what this presentation is all about. Yes, we will serve as a co-fiduciary. We are not going to be the named fiduciary. We are carving out select services that fall within that duty. Some of those we will not be involved with, like payroll related and oversight of vendors, but there's a lot that we can absorb to make it, one, easy to work with us, but more importantly, process is critically important. Process, besides creating consistency, process is really how successful the outcome will be at the end of the day. So again, try not to think in that shared liability. Yes, we will share that liability, but this is a process-driven engagement. This is all about good practice and saving you time and ultimately reducing the risk of audit. Audits happen in an array of different ways. Sometimes a disgruntled participant calls a regulator. Sometimes you're selected randomly. And if your plan is large enough, you're subject to an independent audit each year by an independent auditor. Well, all of those are really the opportunity to show and demonstrate that you as a plan sponsor have really good process. So it certainly reduces risk there when the process is all about the outcome. So Joe's going to lead us into a conversation where he'll outline what are the services that we will be willing to absorb, and those services that you can either continue to retain or share that responsibility by outsource. And I will tell you, we're not going to go into what the pricing looks like because it's going to be different for every plan, but I will leave you with this. We have created a scalable solution, a solution that is aligned with repeatable, prudent process. And more importantly, the expense tied to this is aligned to what the market is today. And over the years, that expense has continued to compress. And I think there's a real opportunity to help a lot of our clients save time, build better process, and reduce the risk for audit. So Joe, take us away with the next slide.
Thanks, Jerry. I might be dating myself here, but this kind of brings to mind the Jerry Maguire movie. There's a line in there that says, help me help you. And this is basically what we're asking or sharing with you guys, the ability for us to help you. So some of the things that we can do along with you, or if there are certain parts that you want us to manage and some that you maintain, we can certainly work in those capacities as well. Because again, the objective here is just to find processes and procedures to help you manage the plan on a day-to-day basis. So some of those items are eligibility management. And so because we receive a lot of the employee information, we have the ability to identify who is becoming eligible for the plan. And we have the ability to disseminate those enrollment materials or information to those employees so that they have an opportunity to log into the Sentinel system and enroll. Additionally, I know some of you are excited to receive surprise emails from your vendors that basically say, please pass this information out to all of your employees. It's excited to get in the mail room and get all that squared away, but we do have the ability, we have facilities on site to help manage the distribution of all of those participant notices, the largest being the one that usually goes out towards the end of the year, which is that annual disclosure package. But there's things that also occur over the course of the year when it comes to fund changes or changes to your plan that employees have to be notified of those as well. Vesting management, again, because we receive and work with a lot of your employee information, we have the ability to track and manage the vesting calculations for your employees and make sure that they're accurate before those distributions or withdrawals are paid from the plan. And then, in my opinion, because I do have a few of my personal clients that have the service, this is the biggest one that they enjoy the most, if you will, is the approval of distributions and withdrawals from the plan, the approval of loans, the handling of the quadro qualified domestic relation orders that come in, as well as rollover deposits that come into the plan. These items here tend to take up most of the time because those employees who have left employment are anxious to receive their bounces from the plan, and so they're usually reaching out frequently to find out what the status is. And there could be a whole host of different reasons to want to look through those requests to make sure that they are indeed being asked for or requested by those individuals. And so if you don't necessarily have the time or the capacity to do that due diligence, we can take on that burden for you as well. And then another one is to prepare, which we do currently. We do prepare and provide what we call a draft Form 5500 to our clients so that they can review. And then, if they're comfortable with what they're seeing there after reviewing it, they can electronically file that. We can do that for you. So that saves, your third-party administrator from reaching out all the time, checking in on you and asking if you filed the 5500. We can make sure that we get that filed for you timely.
Hey, Joe, I just want to touch on one thing, if you can go back. The required disclosure management, even outside of this service, there is an opportunity to help make this easy. We do have a fulfillment option. We do have e-delivery if all your employees have company issued emails that we can adhere to and make that experience a lot easier than it is today, where you may be pushing that out manually. But certainly this service deliverable would include that. And I do want to cover one really important piece. We have the opportunity to turn some of these functions on and some off. So you may want to be involved in something like signing the 5500. We can turn that off and turn the other services on. So there's a lot of flexibility here in what we can do for you to just make it easier to work with us. Thanks, Joe.
So how does a firm like Sentinel, go through the process of being able to provide these services? And it really all starts with payroll information. So by being able to receive information from the payroll file, such as new employees coming on board, we're able to add new employees to our system so that we can track them and provide them those enrollment materials. We're able to update participants' information, such as address changes or termination of employment, so that we can communicate with them or reach out to them regarding either taking withdrawal from their account or providing those required disclosure notices. Updating census information so that we can track vesting and we can track who's becoming a participant and such. And all of that leads to the ability for us to provide accurate reporting so that when you need to go to the Sentinel website and run reports to find information, we are all kind of working with the same data. So that leads us to what we call in our industry as payroll aggregation. And so there are two terms that we usually work with. One is called 360 integration and 180 integration. And what I'll share with you is, while you do see a number of payroll vendors here on the slide, we do work with a lot of other vendors. So please don't, take this as if you don't see your vendor here that we don't work with them. We certainly would love to add on to this list and work with you and your organization to make sure that we can get either one of these processes working. But what 360 really means is the payroll company, once you close out a payroll, the payroll company actually sends that employee payroll file electronically to us directly so that you don't have to be involved in that transmission of that information. We then process the payroll, provide the normal notifications and information that we do now. And then going back the other way, if employees are logging on to the Sentinel website and making deferral changes or loan requests, we're able to take that information and electronically transfer it back to your payroll vendor so that they can update their systems. And now you don't have any manual key entries, no opportunity for coding error and mistakes like that. The 180 is primarily more about your payroll vendor sending that payroll information directly to Sentinel via that electronic method so that you don't have to be involved with that. So those are two very important options, two things that we can certainly work with you on to make sure that we make that experience easy. So for the 316 that Jerry had outlined at the very beginning, this administration deliverable, what would we need to do in order to make sure that this would be a good fit for you? So I think the first thing is that Sentinel would need to be the record keeper and the third-party administrator in this situation, primarily because we're working with employee data and we need to be able to access that in order to provide those deliverables. We would want to look at your plan document to see if there are any items in there that make the process restrictive in some way. So we want to make it a good fit. One of those examples is eligibility. Do you have what we call immediate entry? As soon as somebody is hired, they come right into the plan. That, if you think about it, can be a little challenging for us to provide enrollment information to them, because while you just hired them on Monday, we may not get notified of their employment with your organization until the following week, and they're already 2 weeks in to their employment. So while that's something that we are not necessarily able to provide enrollment portions, that we do have the ability to carve that piece out, like Jerry mentioned earlier, and allow you to continue to disseminate that enrollment information, and we can take on the responsibility for the other 316 items. When we're receiving those payroll files, all employees that are coming across on the file need to have a company email address. Some of the deliverables that we have via the 316 service is us communicating to your employees via that work email address. And then we need to have at least the 180 payroll integration, or what we call DVC, or Data Validation Center, where you may be logging into the Sentinel website and uploading a payroll file that has all of the elements that we need in order to operate the 316 service.
Yeah, and Joe, I'll just add, I mean, this service is really designed for the plan sponsor that just doesn't have the bench internally to ensure that these things are all getting done right. We typically see these clients that have grown exponentially over the last few years, whether it's through organic growth or acquisition. And they've got the same person that's managing the retirement plan from 5 years ago. There's that same person is doing it now, and they're also doing 1,000 of other things. And there's just not a good process in place for all these tasks. That would be a great candidate for this deliverable. It would enable the plan sponsor to outsource some of these responsibilities, know that there would be a thorough and adequate process in place to ensure that these responsibilities were being done. And listen, at the end of the day, process, it's all about the process. I mean, the process trumps outcome. That's something that we live and die by, and ultimately that is what the service is all about. How do we make it easy? How do we help you with really good process?
Thanks, Jerry. So before we move on to, I think, what is our last slide, did you want to check the chat box and see if there were any questions?
So there's been a few chats that have come in. I've addressed them privately, so I think we're all set.
Excellent. All right, well, I've held you in suspense long enough. I wanted to share with you guys something new that we're going to be working through, notifying you of shortly, and it is our plan document subscription service. And so essentially what this outlines is the ability to pay for any plan amendments or any upcoming IRS document restatement periods over the course of a period of time, as opposed to a one-time event. So we just went through a document restatement period about 2 years ago, and what we did find is that for a lot of our plan sponsors, it was kind of a surprise, if you will, of this event, even though it does occur like every 6 to 8 years, if you will. It becomes a challenge to come up with that one-time cost in order to do that document restatement. So what we thought about is, how can we make that experience easier? So we're going to be offering this document subscription service. What it would be is $125 per quarter or $500 a year. And what that would offer you is the ability to do 2 amendments over the course of that year at no charge. And then when we got to that restatement period in 6 or 8 years, there would not be this additional charge that you would have to pay, because you've already prepaid that cost over the previous years, if you will. So we feel like this would be a much better process or program. It allows us the ability to just amend and update your plan as we're moving along, and kind of reduce some of that back and forth correspondence. But there's also always going to be opportunity for a plan consultant to discuss with you any changes to the plan that may make the processing of the plan administration easier. So,
I mean, I think you hit it on the head. This is all about making it easier. We basically took the fee that we charge for the restatement through in one amendment and calculated that fee and just backed into it. We're not looking to generate additional revenues. This is all about just making it easy to do business with us.
So absolutely. So if this service is of interest to you, please let your plan consultant know, and we're happy to kind of get that paperwork started for you. So with that, we hope that you found this to be a very beneficial conversation. And if you have questions or you're interested in the 316 program, please reach out to myself or Jerry, and we will get started on getting this set up for you right away. All right. Thank you very much. Have a great weekend.
Thank you.